Good afternoon. You're all probably wondering why this disheveled-looking individual is standing in front of you after such great speakers have spoken before me. I'm kind of wondering the same thing right now. I've got a tough act to follow after kind of everything that's come before us. But I will ask you to bear with me. I've got a story I'd like to tell. I've got a case I'd like to share. And I think it's helped inform a lens in the world that at least we as an organization, as Mosaic, have begun to kind of apply not only to our clients, but to the way that we approach our industry as a whole. So a little about me. My name's Khaleed. I'm a jack of all, master of none. I've had 5 careers in 5 years, but most recently, I'm the creative director at Mosaic, where I design experiences. Much like yourselves, I watch things, I read things, I love things, I hate things, and I'm going to use the M word. I'm a millennial, and that kind of allows me to kind of, yeah, they've got a little woo in there. I'll take it. I had a quick show of hands. How many people in this audience identify as millennials? Okay, cool. So we've all been in rooms, we've all heard the buzzword, we've all heard what it means, and kind of are probably tired of hearing it. I'm going to reference it one more time, just because there's a point I'd like to be able to prove that kind of comes with the territory. So let's start with a simple idea. When it comes to millennials, we've actually evolved the world in a way that nobody else really has as far as generations have gone before us. The closest thing to what we've done is probably the Industrial Revolution. And the reason I can say that so comfortably is because it's rooted in history. So let's take a quick look back. This isn't different for a lot of you. You know, you all grew up with Nintendos just like I did. I got to school in an era where, you know, I was born with kind of America's beer, if you will. I look at kind of the mobile landscape that was kind of introduced to me at a very young age. And then we kind of moved forward into kind of more modern day. I started college, with MySpace. YouTube was being born as I was kind of learning kind of the world around me and kind of learning to connect with people. And then there's a question mark there. And the question mark there is actually, in my humble opinion, when the world changed and when story making itself was actually born for the first time as a medium. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the idea of story making, simply put, is turning your audience into your story. It's no longer about being able to push a brand message out there, but it's about allowing your audience to become that message, to be able to find the story within the kind of the greater arc, the story that they want to tell. It's about turning your audience into advocates through their voices versus having to push yourself or push your message out to them, which is kind of a little bit of a dated model. So what happened on that day in 2007, July 27th, 2007? Does anyone have any idea what happened on this day? Don't be shy. It's the end of the day. You can yell, you can scream, you can do whatever you want. I'm going to ask for one guess. Pardon? Absolutely. Gentleman in the back. Nobody gets that. That was the day that the iPhone was launched. The iPhone launched on July 27th, 2007. And what the iPhone did for us was it changed our entire world. The iPhone turned every single one of us into a creator, into a distributor, into a publisher. It allowed each of us to have a voice and kind of almost become a journalist in our own right. We were liking things, sharing things. We were kind of optimizing our worlds in a way that we never had before. But all of a sudden, information and information sharing was democratized on one single day. And what that day did was informed, I guess, a view on the world that I'd like to share with you. Based on the iPhone and based on the velocity of change that's occurred, I now believe that everyone is a network. And with everyone being a network, everyone's constantly looking to populate their networks with interesting things. Hence, the birth of story making. Every single individual, every single brand, you, me, everyone in this audience, we're all liking, we're all sharing, we're all taking photos and in real time to be able to publish to our networks. And what's interesting about this kind of moment or this story is when you begin to think about it from a brand perspective, you're a network, I'm a network, Jay-Z's a network, Red Bull is a network, HBO is a network. We're no longer kind of sitting in the confines that we used to be able to sit in to be able to say my direct competitor, if I'm Miller Lite, was Bud Light. My competitor is now the Ellen DeGeneres show. It's a guy named PewDiePie. Does anyone know who PewDiePie is? Yes, you do know who PewDiePie is. And PewDiePie is the most highest paid YouTube individual to exist in history. He reviews video games. But all of a sudden, we're now competing for share of view. Share of view is very different than share of throat or share of voice. Share of view means that we're all competing on a level playing field in a way that we really never have before. So with that lens, understanding that everyone's a network, we're kind of grounded, and at least I'm grounded, in one simple thought. If I want people to be able to talk, to be able to publish, to be able to produce, to be able to create, what do I need to do for them? What sits at the essence of every great social post, of every great photo you've taken, every great tweet that you've sent out? In my humble opinion, it's an experience. It's something tactile, it's something tangible, It's something that made you feel something, whether it be happiness or sadness. Ultimately, experiences drive content, and content fuels the network. And that's the platform that we're going to talk a little bit about today when it comes to this idea of story making. Ultimately, how do we begin to create experiences that drive people to want to share, to want to talk, but most importantly, to become the voice of your brand? Because I can say the words "up for whatever" so many times until I'm blue in the face, but it's not until someone co-opts that message, not until someone makes that message their own, not until someone finds their own filter on that message and pushes it out to their audience, that my work is actually complete. So let's start with a simple assumption. Today is nothing like yesterday, and it's nothing like tomorrow. What that gets at is the fact that we're living in a kind of a place of velocity, a place of constant change, and a place of evolution. And if we live in this time and this age where everything is constantly shifting, we've got to ask ourselves why we kind of hang our hats on this. So hands up if you studied marketing at some point in time and were taught this in a classroom. I'm going to raise my hand again because my 21-year-old sister was taught this about 3 weeks ago in her marketing class. This was built in the 1960s, popularized in the late 60s by Kotler Crewe, and it's great. It's the price of doing business as far as I'm concerned. And when I walk into a CPG room, I wouldn't even dream of saying that this wasn't kind of an appropriate formula, right? You've got to have the right product, you've got to have the right place, you've got to have the right price, and you've definitely got to have the right promotion. But that doesn't reflect that millennial shift. That doesn't reflect the iPhone generation. That doesn't reflect the world of story making that we've all kind of moved into. So we asked ourselves, what does now look like? Now, in our humble opinion, began to look a little different. Now was about transmedia storytelling. Now is about niche audiences and being able to reach them in a way that we never had before. Now is about openness. It's about dialogue. We live in a cause-driven society. And I can't look at a formula that was built in the 1960s and tell you that that's going to help me figure out now. So we took it upon ourselves through kind of a white paper that we've been writing over the course of the last year to redefine what those 4 Ps look like. So in our humble opinion, the new 4 Ps are quite simple. Participation, publication, personalization, and something called Product 2.0. And I'd like to take the next couple minutes to kind of give you an overview of what those are, and then show you how they kind of come to life in practice through a campaign that we worked on earlier this year, or earlier last year, called Whatever USA. So the first P, participation, the move from passive to active, allowing millennials to play a role in our story. Long gone are the days of sweepstakes. Nobody wants to put down their email on a piece of paper and hope for a chance to win something. People want to be able to actively engage in a campaign. They want to be able to co-author. They want to be able to actually tell a story alongside of you. And if you give them the tools, you give them the right devices, you give them the right prompts, and you give them the right entranceways into the conversation, they will. And all of a sudden now, your one brand campaign, your one Facebook campaign, your one kind of promotion has the ability to become so much larger. Next is this idea of publication. And I think it's a no-brainer, but every single one of us is now a publisher. The interesting part about this one is if each of us are a publisher, what does that mean for brands? If I can publish a piece of content every day to up to 10 different mediums that are on my phone, I expect a brand to be able to do so much more. Entertain me, entice me, make me feel, take me to new places. But this notion of publication kind of works in 2 ways. The minute you acknowledge that every single one of us is a publisher, you have to acknowledge that you have to give us things to publish. Experiences. Tantalize me, show me something different, teach me something, and I guarantee you I will share. I guarantee you I will tell the world that I'm interested in whatever it was that I just did in a way to kind of gain social capital, because ultimately that's what we're all doing whether we like it or not. We all feel great. Like physiologically, anytime someone likes our content, that's kind of a driving force that is a much larger conversation than today, but I don't think there's a single person in this room that says they feel bad when someone likes their photo or their Instagram post. So let's talk about number 3, personalization. Millennials consume media with their own me filter. So what we're talking about with personalization is twofold. Number 1, let's start to leverage the data that we have available to us to actually microsegment our conversations. It's no longer about one piece of brand content getting pushed out to the world. It's about being able to figure out who needs what, when, and why. And you have those tools. Any of you who are kind of working in the social space know that through Facebook, through Twitter, through even your ECRM databases, are now able to subsegment your audiences and push out individual messages that make the most sense to that audience. If someone has identified that they like music, don't send them a generic piece of content. Send them something that's music related. Allow them to get excited by that sense of individualism that defines us as a generation. And finally, Product 2.0. So Product 2.0, easiest way to explain this is through a simple example. We used to live in a world where products had functional benefits and emotional benefits. Functional, it makes my whites whiter. Emotional, my family looks great because they're in whiter whites. That's done. It doesn't exist anymore. And now if you don't have a social benefit, if you don't stand for something, if you don't have a sense of purpose to your product, to your campaign, we'll call bullshit. At least I know every single person in this room will call bullshit. It's just a reality of the kind of the way that we exist. I stand for things. In about 2 days, I'm going to shave my face off, and I'm going to grow a mustache for the month of November. Every single one of you has a charity that you believe in, or a cause that you believe in, or a set of values and ethics. Why should brands behave any differently? Especially when they're trying to get you to do something. Especially when they're going to try and get you to become part of their story. Brands that are embracing this idea of social good or finding a sense of purpose are actually empowering people to co-author stories with them. Because now it's not just about a self-ish story, it's a selfless story. So those are the 4 Ps. I kind of jumped through those fairly quickly, but I'd like to be able to show you why I'm so rooted in these 4 Ps and the work that's come out of these 4 Ps. So let me take you to a place called Whatever USA. By quick show of hands, is anyone familiar with this campaign? Oh, okay, fair chunk of people. For those of you who aren't, here's a quick video that kind of gives you a snapshot of what Whatever USA was.
Knowing that millennials crave spontaneous fun, Bud Light launched Up for Whatever in 2014.
I think I could do that.
Everyone agreed it was pretty sweet, for that one guy. But what about the others? How could they bring the same once-in-a-lifetime experience to thousands? So for one weekend in September, Bud Light became the first brand to take over a whole friggin' town and change the identity of Crested Butte, Colorado to
Whatever USA.
It was a massive undertaking. We overcame a lot of obstacles, but in the end, we succeeded and transformed it into a mecca of spontaneity created to win the hearts and minds of 20-somethings by serving up the amazing, shareable experiences they love. And like every town, they needed a mayor, so they chose this super-duper handsome guy.
Yeah, I'm gonna need a cake with a lady inside, a cake with a dude inside, and then a cake with some cake inside for all the people that love some cake.
I was the spokesperson. TV, online, and at live events, building excitement and intrigue around our mystery town.
I will reveal nothing!
We also teamed up with The Onion and other content partners to create additional buzz, because I can only do so much. Turns out, over 200,000 people auditioned for a chance to join me at this unique town/party of a lifetime.
Hey man, you up for whatever?
I'm up for obliterating the planet.
Oh no, bad news. You can't come.
Winners were selected and surprised and then given 24 hours to respond.
What if I brought a plate of taquitos?
No, still no.
September 5th, 2014, 1,300 citizens, led by moi, thank you very much, descended into Whatever USA for 3 days of impromptu concerts and surprise celebrity appearances. Was it a success?
Of course it was.
Citizens of my town took tons of pictures and videos and stuff, then sent it to millions of their friends who didn't get to go. Holy moly, that's a big number. Heck, it was such a success, not only are we doing it again this year, but other towns are already lining up to host the next one.
It's like Christmas, my birthday, Mardi Gras, all combined.
So that was a quick snapshot of Whatever USA. And before we go any further, I want to say that the 4 Ps I just showed you don't only inform multi-million-dollar work. We do a lot of work for clients that have significantly smaller budgets where the 4 Ps are just as important and just as kind of relevant across the board. Because our philosophy is that you have to turn your audience into storytellers. You have to be able to drive content regardless of whether your budget is $100,000 or your budget is $100 million. So that's the one thing I want to be able to kind of dismiss right off the bat. The 4 Ps don't just work when you're playing with a town, if you will. So looking at kind of the Bud Light situation. We started with a very simple business problem. Past 4-week consumption was down, and 21 to 27-year-olds had lost interest in Bud Light. A lot of them actually just had never tried Bud Light. It was just never on their consideration set. We were tasked with building something that changed their minds, something that could live through the summer, something that was a 360 campaign that would actually shake up not only the marketing world, but also the consumer world to get people to kind of readdress a brand that had come out of the gate swinging at the Super Bowl with a really great spot, but didn't have any real-world relevance. So we sat in a room, kind of terrified of the brief we just received, and we asked ourselves one simple question. What if whatever wasn't just a state of mind? What if it could actually be a place? And the reason we went to place was very obvious. A place became a set, a living, breathing entity that we could fill with 1,300 winners and another 4,000 individuals from Crested Butte, Colorado, to become storytellers for the brand. Every single person was able to come out, and 5,000 people ended up telling 1 million stories because we gave them options, we gave them choices. And that was kind of like the driving force of all this. I want to jump back for a second to the word audition that you heard in the video. The success of this program didn't revolve around what happened in that town. The success actually was built leading up to that. When I talked about sweepstakes being dead, sweepstakes in our humble opinion are dead. For the first time, we gave people skin in the game. 200,000 people over the course of the summer actually auditioned in bars. They had to respond, they had to be clever, they had to be quick, and if they sucked, they weren't coming. It was just that simple. But that was a different level of quality, and a different filter, and a different conversation than people had ever had before. All of a sudden, if you had a great response, you wanted to share it. If you didn't have a great response, you were going to share it anyways because nobody had ever asked you to take a little video in a bar and talk about what the 3 things were that you take to whatever USA if you left that morning, or the skill that you're going to bring to the table. It just changed the entire lens around that conversation. So moving forth, I would like to give you a kind of snapshot of how this came together. I'd be remiss if I told you that we did this ourselves. This was IMC work, or kind of integrated media communications work at its finest. So we work with some really talented people to begin to build what we call our transmedia infrastructure. And we use this kind of notion of transmedia very specifically because for us, transmedia storytelling was about telling a story through multiple channels. It wasn't just about our channels, it was about harnessing the power of individual channels. The individual channels in your phone, and your phone, and your phone, and your phone. So in order to be able to kind of do that, you have to build a web. And this was one of the most complicated diagrams I've ever worked on, period. What that is a diagram of every single touch point that existed inside of this campaign, ranging from a fictitious TripAdvisor page with whatever USA on it, to like a Facebook platform, to an audition platform, an Instagram platform, the celebrities that we worked with. But this diagram begins to kind of give you a bit of insight as to how kind of story making really works. Yes, those circles are important. The most important part, though, is that dotted line that connects all those circles. If you build an infrastructure like this, anytime someone enters your world, whether it be through Facebook, whether it be through an online promotion, whether it be through grabbing a beer in a bar, what you're doing is you're opening doors for them. Every single door leads to another door, leads to another door, leads to another door. And you're allowing them to now navigate the sphere of your campaign however they see fit. That's where this kind of idea of like 5,000 people and a million different stories come from. The path to purchase used to be very linear. It used to be this to this to this to this. And that's not how we consume media anymore. So why would campaigns be built in that same fashion? This kind of really informed a lot of the work that we did on this campaign. But again, we stole this. We stole this from George Lucas. We stole this from the people at Harry Potter. This is Hollywood's franchise model. And for the first time, it was being applied to marketing in a way that had never really been applied before, and now continues to set a bar for how we look at brands and how we kind of approach this transmedia storytelling space, and more importantly, the story-making space as a whole. So we went from campaign to content factory. That was kind of the overarching 30,000-foot view. I'd like to spend the next couple of minutes just talking you through what this actually looked like, specifically around that notion of content factory. So the ROI on this, you're probably all freaking out and being like, there's probably zero ROI on taking over a town and building these crazy amounts of infrastructure, throwing an old disco meets a new disco party where like Holy Ghost play with Casey and the Sunshine Band and building 1,000 light-up suits that Alesso is like programming through his hands. And yes, they all came with cost. But what we did at Whatever USA was fill our entire brand social channel for the next year. Every single piece of content that came out of there had a purpose. So for example, we had, well, do any of you guys know that there's a National Bacon Appreciation Day? There is. And as brands, you have an obligation to talk about bacon on National Bacon Appreciation Day. So what we did was we engineered a moment at Whatever USA called Bacon Appreciation. People were able to come in. We brought in a Michelin-starred chef who prepared 5 courses of bacon and Bud Light pairings. That was great for those people who were there. They all talked about it in that moment. What we then did was we were able to take the photo content, the video content, and we were able to save it to use on Bacon Appreciation Day. We shot an entire series of campaigns over the course of one weekend, actually resulting in an ROI that like, went through the roof when you look at the costs that you end up investing in your social agencies and everything else you end up doing. So as much as this was an expensive adventure, when you look at it from a content factory perspective, it's kind of game-changing in that sense. So let's talk about the town real quick. In order to give people an opportunity to explore, you have to build something. So we built a literal town. What you're seeing there is a town of Colorado, Crested Butte, which is in Colorado. Every single blue box that you see is an entire entity that was taken over. We went in, we removed all furniture, all branding, reskinned the entire thing. And over the course of, I'd say about 2 weeks of load-in time, 72 different spaces were transformed with new names, new aesthetics, new identities, all driven to the fact that every single person and every single moment that was created was driven for social. When you walked into the general store, it felt like it had been there for a generation. When you walked into the Bud Light Buddy Bar, you could only walk in if you were handcuffed to somebody else, and you were served a Bud Light and a Bud Light Lime, because those are perfect pairs. Every single detail all the way through kind of was driven to get you to pull your phone out. And that was just simply from a map standpoint. When we went into the design exercise, I'll be honest, I've never designed a town. It's never been part of my my role as a creative director before. But we built an entire brand vocabulary that was built to inspire conversation. It wasn't just the same logo slapped on over and over and over and over again. Anytime you turned a corner, there was something new to take a photograph with, something new to talk about, something new to get inspired about. And what you're seeing there is kind of a snapshot of what that brand vocabulary began to look like. Probably my most favorite thing that we did in this kind of space was the rhinos. And there's not a photo of the rhinos in there, but as Chicago has horses and Dallas has cows, at Whatever USA we had rhinos. And we worked with 10 contemporary artists who all flew in to actually paint each of their rhinos. The rhinos became a huge success to the point where people tried to steal them. Imagine trying to steal a rhino the size of this platform at 4 o'clock in the morning, slightly intoxicated. And that was our hope, right? When people try and steal the things you build, you've done something right. So that's probably the best piece of advice I could take you. Make things that people want to steal. As we go through this, I want to show you probably the most important part of all this, which was the calendar. This looks like a schizophrenic mess, but that was the point. The point was you had to make choices. And we built this personalized calendar that allowed everybody to see a little bit of themselves inside the way the weekend shaped out. You could wake up, and if you were into yoga, we had a yoga class at 10,000 feet. If you weren't into yoga, we took you for a run across the mountain to be able to kind of see the beauty of Colorado. If you weren't into that, we did something called cupcake tasting. And cupcake tasting allowed us to fly in cupcakes from the top 6 bakeries in the US, and you were blindfolded and you had to guess which bakery they came from. If you guessed all 6 correct, you got a year's supply of cupcakes. Does that sound like a beer event to you guys? No, right? But that's the reality. People aren't defined by the one thing that they drink. They're defined by all the things that they are. And that's where that kind of idea of personalization really came to life. And kind of leaning into that, our whole goal was to go beyond fist pumping. Beer, for the longest time, has got a pretty shitty rap, right? It's just a bunch of dudes doing this in their frat houses. And I didn't come from that place. That's not who I am, but I drink beer. And it was time to start building for a new beer consumer, a beer consumer who was just as interested in cupcake tasting and yoga as they were in learning how to play the guitar from someone who was there to teach them. We ran something called Band Camp, where we brought a beatboxer, and the beatboxer ran a class that taught 35 people how to beatbox. Little did they know that an hour after their class, they were actually going to be on the main stage opening for Vanilla Ice, who happened to be serving vanilla ice cream at that time. But the long and short of it was this was a very different approach that turned every single person into an empowered storyteller. Everyone had an experience that they wanted to talk about it because it's so different and so unique. And all of a sudden, we didn't have to do any work. When this campaign was said and done, we launched one TV spot at the end of it because all the other content that we pushed out came from other people's hands. And we got behind that from a social standpoint. It was about supporting tweets, it was about supporting Facebook posts, it was about supporting other people's YouTube videos, but it wasn't about our own. So last but not least, I got to call out the one thing that probably is the reality. You all who are familiar with this campaign know that this wasn't easy. 2 days out from the town, there was a town hall meeting where they were threatening to pull the entire town and have the whole thing fall apart. You want to talk about tears and fear? I will tell you that that is something I do not wish upon my worst enemy. But the reality is that we had no blueprint. But that's been the most fun part about this whole space. As we continue to define what story making is, as we continue to figure out how to build experiences that make people want to take out their phones and talk about how much they love what they just did, you got to go into unknown territory. It's just a reality. And if you don't, that's cool. But the innovators of our time, the people who are going to push things forward, the people who are going to kind of make new waves, are the people who are willing to take that risk. Obviously a calculated risk, but take the risks. Take the risks, dream big, be bold, and whether it's a $100,000 budget or a $10 million budget, don't be afraid to step outside of the confines of what you know. Don't be afraid to learn from places you've never learned from before. And I think, Rana from Lightwave is a great example of that. That was a risk. 3 years ago, that platform didn't exist whatsoever, and now it's become a beacon that brands across the world are looking kind of to use to fuel their experiences and their social engagements. So to wrap all of this up, I will say that we did use the 4 Ps, right? Participation was a big part of everything that we did. Every participant had skin in the game from an audition standpoint, but when they got there, we also gave them a canvas, not a conveyor belt. They got to curate and design their own experiences, and everyone got to pick their own path. When it came to personalization, every experience reached deeper into a niche. And what we actually did was we surveyed the people who were coming to Whatever USA in advance, got a subsegment of that audience, and built experiences based on who was coming. So again, we freaked out because we're doing a lot of this last minute, but the reality was we had to wait. We had to wait to make sure there were enough people who cared about bacon to bring bacon appreciation to life. You had to wait to make sure there was enough people who loved the idea of old disco meeting new disco to bring that moment to life. You had to wait to figure out if Vanilla Ice was still going to be relevant, which he somehow was because he had broken and entered into someone's house a couple weeks before and had made news and yada, yada, yada. The notion of publication is a foregone conclusion. You build things that people want to talk about, that they want to experience, and they will become your publishers. And finally, product 2.0. Our goal was to leave the town of Crested Butte better than the way we found it. And over the course of the weekend, we had a number of different activations that allowed people to actually give back to Crested Butte on a one-to-one level, whether it was a local food bank, whether it was a legacy project that we left behind in the form of an ice arena, whether it was kind of the bonds that were forged that allowed kind of us to reach deeper into that sense of community and kind of the donation that was made to the town. We weren't afraid to tell that story because that story was a big part of why we went out there to begin with. With that, all I can say is that there isn't a formula, but there is an approach. The formula used to be the 4 Ps the way that we understood them. The approach is the 4 Ps the way that we look at them now. It requires a ton of hard work. It requires a ton of research. It requires collaboration in ways that a lot of us are kind of afraid to do. But if you don't take those chances, if you don't take those steps, we're going to be stuck as an industry. And I think every single person in this room is probably as excited about that as I am. The fact that events are no longer just the thing that you used to do on the side. Events are becoming the core DNA of brands. Experiences are becoming kind of the fuel that are driving conversations forward. And every single one of you in this room has a role to play in that conversation. So with that, I say merci. Thank you.